and practice of procurement. Unit 3, identifying need and creating specifications. Section 3, creating specifications. But at the end of this section, we should be able to define specification, identify certain key features of effective specifications, mention some advantages of specification, mention some disadvantages of specification, communicate the consequences of poor specification, and explain their approaches to specification development. A specification can be simply defined as the statement of the requirements to be satisfied in the supply of a product or service. The specification provides a detailed description of the goods or services a supplier is expected to supply to an organization in the form of a document. As part of the procurement process, the role of specification is to define the requirement. That is, after a need has been identified, all stakeholders or the relevant stakeholders are encouraged to consider what they really need and whether what they think they need is the only or most cost-effective or most value-adding solution. Specification also communicates the requirements clearly to suppliers so that suppliers can plan to conform to what the buying organization has detailed in the specification document, or perhaps also use their expertise to come up with innovative or lower cost solutions to the requirements or the problem at hand. Another role of specification is also to provide a means of evaluating the quality or conformance of the goods or services supplied for acceptance if the goods supplied conforms to the specification, or rejection if the goods supplied does not conform to the specification. What are the features of an effective specification? 1. Clear and unambiguous as to what is required. Specification is said to be effective if the requirement is defined clearly, as well as there is absence of ambiguity in the document. Once a supplier reads, once anybody in charge reads the document, they're supposed to know exactly what the organization is looking out for, what the requirement is supposed to consist of. It should be clear and unambiguous. Also, should be concise. The specification should not be overly detailed, because the shorter the specification, the less time and cost it takes to prepare. Specification should also be comprehensive for us to say the specification has been effective. That is, the specification should include or deal with all other aspects of the requirement. It should cover all the points of the requirement. Specification is effective when it is compliant with all relevant national or international standards and health, safety, and environmental laws and regulations. The specification should strictly comply with all the relevant laws, standards, as well as the acceptable practices of both the national and international rules and regulations. Complying with the relevant standards will help us achieve better results and also save us the time and stress of any legal issues that are bound to arise. An effective specification is also up to date with current design solutions and supply market development. It is also expressed in terms which can be understood by all key stakeholders, that is, not too technical for suppliers or purchasers or users. If you design a specification such that only you, the person that designed the document, can understand the terms and whatever is in the document, then specification has not been effective. You don't have to waste resources other than the one already wasted on preparing the specification document to go and employ the services of another person to help us understand what is in the document. It should be clear and unambiguous, like we said earlier. Also, an effective specification is one that is value analyzed. We should know that every additional requirement increases the price. So it is important to specify only requirements that positively add value. Advantages of specification. Because a lot of thinking and planning goes into specification or drawing up your specification document, you realize it forces careful consideration of the need and possible alternative ways of satisfying those needs. So for instance, if you bring your suppliers on board in designing your specification document, some of these people, because they have knowledge about what is happening in the industry, they are able to come up with innovative solutions, better solutions than the one you are even originally thinking of. We are able to know at the end of the day which solution or which option is better than the other, which option is better cost saving than the other. which option is going to give us a competitive advantage over our competitors, which can lead to a whole lot of benefits to the organization. Also, if the items are to be purchased from more than one supplier, the use of conformance specification may be essential to ensure uniformity. Now, conformance specification here means the buying organization knowing exactly what they want, knowing what a requirement should consist of, and detailing exactly what they expect the suppliers to supply in their documents. And as a supplier, you're supposed to conform to all the requirements that has been detailed in the documents. We don't expect you to add yours or do anything. We tell you exactly what we want the requirements to be or to achieve, and then you do exactly that for us. Now, if we are buying the requirements from more than one supplier, it won't be good to allow the suppliers to do their own innovative things, because we want to ensure uniformity in the whole thing, in all our requirements. We use conformance specification where we detail exactly what is to be supplied, exactly what we want the suppliers to supply to us, so that at the end of the day, even though we are getting our requirements from different suppliers, they are all going to end up supplying the same thing to us. So we have two types of specification, the conformance specification and the performance specification. The conformance specification is when you know exactly what you want and you want your suppliers to supply exactly that. However, the performance specification, you don't give a detailed description of exactly what you want. You just tell the suppliers what the requirement is supposed to achieve or what you're going to be using the requirements for. And the suppliers are going to use their own innovative ideas to come up with a best solution to help you achieve the requirements. These two distinctions will be explained in details in the next section. However, we want you guys to understand that with the conformance specification, because the buying organization is detailing exactly what supplier is supposed to supply. So that's why I'm saying it is better to use that kind of specification if you are using more than one supplier for a requirement, so that we ensure uniformity, so that all suppliers will end up supplying the same thing. Then we have specification to provide useful criteria for measuring the quality and acceptability of purchases once delivered. In the specification document, because we've already outlined what we want and what we expect the suppliers to supply us, it serves as a criteria for measuring the performance of suppliers, right? So after the supplier has executed their part of the contract, we measure this against the criteria we established in our specification document to in order to ascertain whether the suppliers indeed complied with our specification. Now we move to some disadvantages of specification. Detailed specification is an expensive and time-consuming process and almost certainly uneconomic for small value purchases. A lot of money will go into the whole process. We have to survey the market, conduct market research, involve suppliers and all that, which involves cost, right? Using our resources. So at the end of the day, we realize we spend a lot of money, we waste most resource in designing our specification, and this is especially bad if the requirements involved is of a small value. The value of the requirements is small. That does not compensate us using resources on the specification document. Also, we have the cost of inspection and quality control are greater than if simple specification is used. So in specification, we don't mention brand names. You just have to give a description of the requirements and the suppliers will supply or submit their documents detailing what is available, what they can provide to solve the problem at hand. Now, a lot of inspection and quality control it will have to go on here, because you have to go through the whole process to ensure each supplier is really meeting our requirements or our specification. Whatever they are saying they are going to supply us, what indeed we want. This wouldn't have been the case if we just give out brand names. So exactly, for instance, we say we want 10 boxes of Big Pen. Big Pen is Big Pen wherever we go. So because we don't really give out brand names or some simple specification, we realize that we have to invest cost in the whole process. The third disadvantage here is specifications can become too firmly embedded. They need to be regularly reviewed to ensure that the latest design decisions and the latest developments in the supply market are being taken into account. Consequences of poor specification. The consequences of ineffective specification processes are potentially costly for the organization. There may be misunderstandings with suppliers over the requirements and expectations, leading to the rejection of deliveries, lost production time, the legal disputes, and damaged suppliers' relationships. Also, when specification is ineffective or poor specification, there may be misunderstandings with other stakeholders over the requirements and expectations, which will lead to internal conflict, the resistance to use the product, and loss of credibility for procurement. There are more likely to be quality issues in the goods supplied, and as we have already seen, these are costly in terms of lost time, the scrapped goods, time spent to rework, additional inspections and controls, and so on. And if care is not taken that the defect items reach our customers, there may be additional serious consequences of loss of customer loyalty, lost business, the adjustment of complaints, and so on. Again, poorly defined specifications may mean that even if the materials conform to specification, they will fail to function as they should. The risk and cost of such a failure is borne by the supplier. The risk and cost of such a failure is borne by the buying organization rather. This is because it's the buying organization that designs the specification documents, right? Not the suppliers. So you, the buying organization, you've designed your document. You are telling the suppliers exactly what they should do, what you want the materials or the requirements to achieve. Now, because the specification is poorly done, the specification itself is poor. It could even be that the materials specifying or you're asking them to supply is not what is needed to solve the problem at hand. If this happens, even if the suppliers supply the materials conform to the specification, it will still fail to function as you expect it to be because that is not the material that is needed to solve a particular problem. And if that happens, it's the buying organization that is going to bear the risk and cost of such a failure, right? And then we also have goods and services may be overspecified as a consequence of poor specification related to some ideal standard without reference to user actual needs, the cost of higher standards, or the added value actually contributed by the higher standards. We now move to some approaches to specification development. Four approaches have been outlined here. We have the early buyer involvement, the formal committee approach, informal approach, and procurement coordinator approach. The first one, which is the early buyer involvement. This is when the procurement professional, the procurement department, is involved right from the onset of product development, either on an advisory or a full-time basis. So as an organization developing a new product, you don't wait till you've gone through the whole product development phase before you involve your procurement department telling them to go and buy this and that. No. This approach to ensuring effective specification development, you involving your buyers early in your product development stage is going to ensure efficiency and effectiveness in your whole process. Remember, it's these buying organizations that are going to buy the requirements we will need to develop the product. These buyers also are the ones with the close contact with our suppliers. They know what is happening in the market. So if you go and sit in your office and then develop your products without consulting them, you may end up using an old design that is out of date, missing out on an innovative, better, improved, cost-effective requirement that has come to the market. So because of some of these reasons, we are saying it's important to involve your buyers early in your specification, in your product design phase, right, in order to achieve an effective specification document to ease the burden on the procurement department as well as the suppliers that are going to supply the requirements. Secondly, we have the formal committee approach. This is when management form a committee with members representing each key stakeholder. That is, we have someone from design, someone from engineering, we have production on board, we have people from marketing, the quality management, and procurement. Preparing a specification is a matter of reconciling conflicting objectives from each department or various units. So we don't expect one department to go and sit in their office and design their document alone by themselves. All the units, the key stakeholders must come on board to give their input in order to ensure we have the best solution at hand. The third approach is informal approach to specification development. So the informal approach to specification development is when buyers are encouraged to challenge the assumptions of users and to suggest alternative methods and materials for consideration. Designers are also encouraged to seek advice from buyers before going too far down any particular design path. So this informal approach is an approach used by management in an attempt to bridge the gap between commercial and engineering factors. We have procurement coordinator approach. So this is a formalization of the informal approach with procurement staff designated as liaison officers to coordinate the required communication. Now, because we've involved the procurement department in our product development stage, they will also probably go and seek the input of suppliers or specialists who are most likely to supply us our requirements. They will bring the input of these people into the organization and help us come up with the best solution at hand, right? By way of summary, we have looked at the definition of specification. We also discussed the features of effective specification and some advantages as well as some disadvantages of specification. We ended by considering some consequences of poor specification and certain approaches to specification development. Thank you.